The last speaker is Dr. Rachel Nanson, who specialises in the geomorphic analysis of rivers, coasts and marine environments. And she'll be demonstrating the environmental management potential of the Digital Earth Australia Coastlines product. So Rachel, take it away.
Thanks, Stuart. And thank you for having me here to speak about this morning. I'm going to be talking about Digital Earth Australia is one of its most recent and relevant, I guess, products to have emerged just earlier this year, the Digital Earth Australia Coastlines product. So earlier on, Stuart mentioned these series of national workshops that were held by Digital Earth Pacific to help identify the priority use cases for nations in the region. And we have the tier 1 and the tier 2 needs and use cases here on the right hand side, with the tier 1 categories or the tier 1 needs and use cases being those identified as universally required. So looking at these in the context of the Coastlines product that I'll present on, we can see this contributing, a product like this contributing to understanding 4 of these tier 1 and tier 2 issues, specifically climate change, coastline change detection and coastal area change, disaster management with cyclones and coastline recovery, and also in this topic of geology and mine sand resourcing in the coastal zone. So the Digital Earth Australia Coastlines product can be accessed via this link at the top of the page. And what it is it's a product that presents the annual coastline position and the rates of change in those annual coastline positions around the entire Australian coastline from 1988 to the present. And what it does in the back end is it combines Landsat satellite imagery over the last 30 odd years with tidal modelling to accurately locate the zero mean sea level or zero AHD Australian height datum coastline position for each and every year. So this is an average annual coastline position. And those coastlines in the slides that I'll show you next will be illustrated using this colour ramp here from the duller colours from the earlier coastlines from 1988, early 90s, through to the very bright lines that you'll see that represent the 2019 coastline. And the statistics that we have derived from those coastline positions are presented using this colour ramp, where the brighter and larger reds represent quite rapid rates of coastal retreat, through to the brighter blues that represent quite rapid rates of coastal progradation or building out of that coastline. And what you can see on the right here is that national data set, which shows you the regionally significant hotspots of change, if you like. And we're going to go into the next slide up to this hotspot of change up here in Chambers Bay in the Northern Territory. So zooming into that, if you were to go to that product and zoom in on this, it's quite easily digestible. You can zoom in and out on this product. And at the national scale, what you were seeing were these points here in what we call data set 3. These are the 5 kilometre averaged rates of change along that coastline. So this coastline's been retreating quite rapidly, and average rates across 5 kilometre reaches have been retreating at up to about 8.5 metres per year for 30 odd years. So a significant amount of retreat. And then if you zoom in still further, what will come up on the screen will be these 30 metre spaced points, and they'll give you the rates of change for smaller sections of coastline. And you can see that those rates jump right up here to things like 10.5 metres per annum of coastal retreat. So really significant rates of retreat. If you zoom in still further on that data set, these annual coastlines, which are really what this is all based on, the data set 1, will come up, and you'll have those duller purple contours showing you where the coastline used to be in 1988 and the early 90s, through to the brighter colours here by 2019. And what that helps you do is, if you look over on the right hand side here, here's this retreating coastline here. If you look at a single Landsat image from 1988, you can just make out this mangrove fringe that fronts the shoreline at that time. And then by 2019, you can see that that mangrove coastline is now being converted to clastic shoreline or unvegetated coastline. And the mangroves are only persisting inside the tidal channels. And you can see the impact that's having on resisting the rates of retreat in front of the mangrove shoreline, whereas the shorelines that have lost that mangrove are retreating at a much faster pace. So you can start to understand the sorts of processes that might be going on to cause that variation in rate. So what I'm going to do next is I'll take you through a series of DA coastline analog case examples to show you the sorts of issues you might see that are relevant to the region, to the Pacific region. So, for example, just some quick research I did of the sorts of issues I see that you're facing on the Marshall Islands. Here's some fairly obvious threats to infrastructure. In Tonga, here's an example of an engineering design for emplacement of a groin. And in Vanuatu, a single example here of a coastal retreat, coastal erosion impacting on vegetation health. So I'll be able to see all of these sorts of scales of issues in the DA Coastlines product. So I'm going to start here up in Western Australia. You see up in the top right, we've got the location. I'm going to take you on a whistle-stop tour across Northern Australia. And this is a place called Roebuck Bay. This is a Ramsar wetland area. And you can see inside the embayment, those blue colours are showing that that coastline has built out at quite a rate over the last 30 odd years, while the coastline immediately south of it has been retreating very rapidly. And if you click on one of these points, a plot like this one on the right-hand side appears. So it's quite easy to get to the data and see these variations in rate of change. Importantly, in this area here, which is represented in this box here in blue, you can see that the 3-year average rates of progradation, they vary with time. And so do this red line representing the erosion out here at Racecourse Plains, that varies through time. And broadly speaking, you can see some relationship with how episodes of erosion on that more exposed section of coast seem to correspond to pulses of progradation within the embayment. And you can track this through time and the relationship starts to break down more recently. You can also pair this data with other climate indices or climate records, in this case, the 3-year moving average change in sea level, which is this dashed line. And you can see that this is certainly related to these pulses of shoreline progradation and retreat. So you can really start to dive down as into the detail that you need to understand what might be driving these processes. I'm moving across to the Northern Territory. This is the Croker Island group of islands off the Northern Territory, and it's a really important location for turtle nesting. A range of different turtles nest in this location, and some of the densest turtle nesting in the region occurs here on the southern side of Lawson Island. And you can see that this peninsula here has been undergoing rapid retreat on its western limb and rapid progradation on its eastern limb. And this is just an image, an oblique image looking across that peninsula there. It's obviously really important for environmental managers and ecologists to understand the rate of change of those habitats and the compensatory adjustments that are happening on the other side of the island. And I've put this one here in as well, Delphinia Island, which is about 1 kilometre to the south, just to demonstrate the scale at which we can see this type of change. So if you zoom in on that, you can see that this barrier emerged and then was inundated in more recent years. So you've lost that lagoon, to some extent, that lagoon protected area over the period of record. So the last Australian example I want to show you now is obviously off northern Queensland here in the Torres Strait at Porrima or Coconut Island. And this island's only 2 kilometres long. And at the western end of it, you can see significant amounts of change with that northern side of the island prograding and the southern side of the island eroding. And here's an image taken from the southern side of that island where the coconut palms are falling into the ocean. This is obviously really important for the locals with the potential loss of infrastructure on the southern side of the island and the progradation over there on the northern side of the island. So both of those products, the 30-metre spaced point statistics and the contours, illustrating that type of change. And the last example I want to show you is to move away from Australia and just show you a couple of examples from Digital Earth Africa and the Coastlines prototype product that's been created there. In Togo here in West Africa, you can see here that the coastline here was holding fairly steady back at these purple, these darker hues. And then this port was built and the breakwall extended and the coastline prograded out quite rapidly. This is captured at quite rapidly as it's prograded out. And it helps you to understand the longshore connectivity and downdrift impacts of these sorts of projects where this rapid progradation here has interfered with the longshore drift from the west to the east of sediment that would normally supply this coast. And zooming in on that section, you can see while the coastline used to be out here, it was holding reasonably steady in the early 90s. Once that port was expanded and that breakwall was expanded, the coast has rapidly been retreating into this highly populated area, so causing those longshore issues in erosion. And another example just further east in Benin, you can see the impact of the groins that were in place in the early 2000s here. And so this coast was retreating, and now it's holding firm following the emplacement of those groins. So just a couple of examples of the sorts of impacts of infrastructure that you can track with a product like this. So if you were to go to DEA Coastlines yourself and you wanted to have a look and see how this sort of a product can be used, you could go to an example like this, Port Fairy in Victoria in Australia. You could click on one of these points and this plot here would open up, and you can download that data yourself to investigate in whichever way you like. Now, this is a very recently released product. It's only been out for a few months, but we've got some pretty exciting stakeholder uptake already. The Victorian government, DELP, have already integrated the coastlines data, which you can download the entire data set, or you can look at it online. And they've integrated it into their own CoastKit platform. Over here, you can see this is the Shoreline Trend Digital Earth Australia. They've presented it in a different way, so you can modify the way that the data is then presented to match how it is that you'd like to present data on your platform. And on the right-hand side here, you can see that this red line here represents the coastlines product itself. And these purple lines here represent some of the higher resolution coastline movement measurements that the Victorian government has been able to measure. And they've also superimposed this on the longer term aerial imagery analysis that they've undertaken with the vegetation line. So yeah, in summary, I think there's quite a lot of potential for something like the coastlines product to be used in Digital Earth Pacific to identify regionally and nationally significant hotspots of change, and to understand the rates and magnitudes of change, and potentially to start to drill down and try and understand some of the drivers of that change. And to also understand the responses to engineering interventions, sand mining or pumping, and hard structures. So if you'd like to look at the product to see how it might work, there's the link again there. I'd like to thank you for listening. Happy to answer any questions, of course, and please direct any questions outside of the question time to dea@ga.gov.au. And I just, for those that might be interested, the most relevant papers that back up the science of this Landsat sub-pixel analysis technique that supports DEA coastlines, here are the two papers that have been recently published. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. And really good work. It's important to mention, as Rachel just showed, that most of the products that have been developed for Digital Earth Australia, Digital Earth Africa, and the DataCube work in Colombia have been published in the peer-reviewed literature. So, you know, the algorithms are open, are peer-reviewed, and transparent in that sense, and that's important to recognise, because it's very key that people trust and understand the shortcomings too of any of these products as they go forward.